Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, today I'm joined by Andrew Godambe. He was gracious enough to come on here and chit-chat with me. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Excellent. So where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in Kingwood, which is a suburb of Houston, north of Houston. I was born in England to an Indian father and an Irish mother. My last name is Indian, East Indian, not the feather, as they say.
Yes, sir.
But I hope I can say that. But I grew up, kind of with an interest in wildlife.
So how old were you when you moved to the United States or to Texas?
I was almost 3 years old.
Okay. So relatively most of your life that you're going to remember you were here in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. For the most part, this has been my home.
And what was living out there in Kingwood? Were there a lot of reptiles? Is that kind of what got you into it, or was it a family interest?
There was the walking along, living in the Bayou City, there was drainage ditches all throughout the neighborhood. So I would kind of walk along those. As I remember being young with my mother, and we'd see turtles just basking, just red-eared sliders. And in my mind now, they were huge to me. I'm sure some of the females were 12 inches, carapace length, but that really got me interested in reptiles. And then I remember a bird dropping what was probably a Nerodia, but at that time I didn't know, on our driveway, where we lived in this neighborhood where it wasn't developed yet. And but this snake was dropped on the driveway, so I was intrigued.
Yes. And how old were you when you first started kind of getting interested like that?
Well, I mean, I have early remembrance of it. I guess I was probably 6 or 7 before I actually kept reptiles, but I remember vividly having memories of seeing reptiles, when I was about 5 years old, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That's kind of like that point, right, where you have that weird little spark where you see it and you go, "Oh, that's cool," and then it potentially sticks with you to where now, right? Grown ass men still loving it.
Are green tree frogs laying eggs in like a neighbor's kiddie pool or something? And I mean, I have a lot of memories of being interested in reptiles and trying to culture reptiles. Early herpetoculture, before I knew what herpetoculture was.
Yes. And then you were saying, so you said before you started keeping stuff. So when did you start keeping animals, other than just stuff you were collecting, or I guess setting up a tank and really doing it?
I would say around 10 years old. My parents were supportive enough of it. My father was not a huge fan of snakes, so I never really. And I don't know if turtles and tortoises were my first interest, and I don't know if it was because they were my first interest or because they were the first animals I could keep. But I didn't keep snakes until I was in high school. But I got into turtles and tortoises. I had axolotls. I had some different newts, and I kept them in 10-gallon tanks with, I guess, fluval filters at that time were like cutting edge, or at least what was available at pet shops. And you know, I kind of I became I a lot of people cut their teeth on field herping, and I did find a lot of animals around the Houston area or the Kingwood area where I lived. But I would say that I probably spent more time trying to figure out how to keep these critters alive and uh, and thriving. And you know, you go through phases as a kid, but turtles and tortoises ended up being what I was most interested in.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And were you mainly keeping stuff inside at that point? Were you doing any like outside ponds or anything?
Uh, we keep some box turtles outside, but no, for the most part, it was inside with
Gotcha.
the Vita lights, which were the full spectrum fluorescent lights at that time that were considered the best for reptiles. Was what I remember using.
Yes, sir. And so most of the knowledge that you were collecting and applying to what you were doing, how were you getting that? Was it going into a local pet shop or
Yeah, I ended up. My mother would drop me off at a place called Texas Exotics. It was a Montgomery County feed store at one point, and a guy that's still a good friend of mine now, to this day, Craig Howard. They would they had kind of a pet shop on the side and had reptiles available, and he kind of, I guess, brought me into, I mean, for in a major way, brought me into the reptile keeping hobby. And I ended up working for him for several years. And yeah, I mean, that's how I learned. I always had an interest in them, and you know, this was a place where, wow, they had these animals that I was just mesmerized by, and I just kind of hung out until they gave me a job. Really.
I think that's very similar to kind of my start. And so I can relate with that.
I'm sure it is. I mean, you have to love it and really like it. I mean, you become you're a hindrance until you become like helpful, I guess,
Yeah.
in some ways.
No, for sure. And what were some of those early memories of going in there and then eventually working at that shop? What was that like?
Big-headed turtles, pancake tortoises. I mean, species that were. I mean, I don't know what a magnocephala costs now, but they were $60 turtles, and they were packed so tight that they would bite each other's tails off. I mean, I don't mean to be graphic or overly over the top, but these were gorgeous turtles, and they would come in kind of beat up because they were. I mean, that was just their nature to bite each other when they were in close proximity. But big-headed turtles, man, were like just these awesome, awesome turtles to see. And pancake tortoises were very difficult to get for a long time after. I mean, they were $60, I remember as a kid. And then there went through at least a 10-year spot where you couldn't find a pancake tortoise. And I did, and I bred them. Um, but I paid a premium for them, you know, when I was older. So I've seen the hobby go through some changes. And I do kind of look at it, I guess, more so as a hobbyist than, or as a reptile keeper, as opposed to maybe a hardcore field herper. You know, I like herping, but my experience and my kind of niche is probably more keeping animals in captivity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's I think that it's interesting, right? And how some people kind of pivot one way or the other on that, and just the same as I feel like an interaction between common, like the average keeper and herper and the zoo field and scientists having those crossovers of information is viable. Everybody plays their part in the hobby, and all sides are equally important, I think.
Yeah, well, I'd hope so. I mean, you kind of look back at your life, and I mean, I've been kind of dabbling in this for, I mean, damn near 30 years. And, I hope that I've learned something that I can impart something to people. Um, and, it hasn't been in vain. But I mean, the hobby's definitely, I think welfare of animals, I think general knowledge of reptiles. I mean, it's more mainstream now, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's as far as animal welfare, it's better.
Yes, sir. Well, yeah, I mean, going back to kind of what you're talking about, where you're getting in large shipments of these animals and they're packaged in ways where at the time that's was the norm, and it's not. We can do better, and we do better now, but that was just the reality of it at the time, right? I remember getting the sacks of imported ball pythons, coming
Right.
straight off the plane, and they'd been in a bag the whole time. They hadn't even had their
And they
first
look,
ship.
I swear they looked lighter in color when they came in than they did the next day. It was so weird with ball python. I would never
Well,
be able to pick out the next big thing because they I swear they look different. The babies look different when they were first out of the sack and then the next day. So
yeah. Well,
I had never kept ball pythons at home, and that's not a diss to ball pythons. It never happened. And, but I remember seeing babies, and I would be absolutely hopeless at picking out interesting ones out of a
yeah.
sack because they all looked pretty cool to me.
Yeah, no, I mean that's still one of the coolest memories. How cool is that to look at, 50 examples of an animal in one bag, and then there's five more bags to go.
Right.
And you're getting to look at all that stuff, and you're the first people other than the importer to look at them. And I mean those are cool memories, right? And I think that maybe looking back, that seeing those color changes, one, most of the time, at least the shipments we got, they hadn't had their first shed, and they're probably a little dehydrated, right? So
Right.
I think seeing that when an animal gets dehydrated, they get kind of a lighter color when it's starting to get kind of desperado there. So
That would make sense. Yeah.
I don't,
That
I don't
was
know what
something
your
I
guys'
never.
protocol was. Those animals come in and getting to experience that. What were yeah, for sure. That was a point you touched on where you said, hey, when I was younger, they were coming in and it was a $60 animal, and now looking at some of the prices on these animals now, due to either over collecting or those areas making it harder to export
Economics,
them.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and popularity, right? I
Right.
think I think it's a double-edged sword where you do see more. Um, you do see reptiles becoming more popular, more commonly kept, and it makes sense, right? As
Right.
more people have less space and are working more. Something like a reptile is a great fit for many of those people.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned pancake tortoises, animals that I bred afterwards, and it was like they were. I mean, it was really difficult to acquire pancake tortoises. It seemed to me for a good 10-year period, and finally bred them, and with big-headed turtles. I mean, I mean, they're expensive.
And so with the pancake tortoises, what got you into breeding those? Was it you didn't find them anymore, and that kind of
I
gave you the
had
drive to do it?
I had a single animal or a pair of, or not even a pair of animals, two females, and I was desperately trying to find mates for them, and I finally did. But the cost was quite a bit more than you know the $60 a piece. It was when I initially got them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many animals that, I remember seeing as a kid that would come into the pet shop that, it was a $15 lizard, maybe a $45 lizard. And now, you can't, I haven't seen them in a long time. And it's pretty interesting kind of seeing how that shifts over time. And so one of your first experiences getting out there and getting to learn at a pet shop. What other animals did they carry at that pet shop? Obviously, you had an interest in turtles, and they were getting imports of ball pythons. But what else were you exposed to?
No, we had tiger salamanders, all kinds of stuff that were commonplace from out of Portugal, and commonplace stuff that you don't see as much now. But as far as what I was interested in, it was like prehensile skinks, and I mean there was a bunch I was interested in when I was younger, and then ended up getting older and then becoming more interested in the native tech.
And you were doing that, and it sounds like it transitioned into more stuff after that. From what age to what age did you work in at the pet shop?
I worked for the Howards from probably the age of 13 up until I was 18 or 20. And there was, even after the shop closed down, there was captive breeding going on with various python species and boas and geckos also.
Very cool. Very cool. And so that was something that kept you occupied for a while. And so as you were kind of evolving in this time of keeping, what was your collection like at that point? I guess when you were a little bit older, 18 to 20.
I kept primarily turtles and tortoises, um, and maybe a few different species of box turtles also. But
Okay.
I primarily kept turtles and tortoises.
Very
Uh,
cool.
yeah.
What were some of those? So were you like, obviously you were keeping some of the more obscure, cool stuff. What was the stuff that was in your collection at that point that you remember readily?
I mean, early on, there were, species that aren't as readily available now, like pancake tortoises. I remember having mangrove monitors early on. I remember having uh, fire salamanders that were probably out of Portugal, and various species early on. But as far as what I kept long term, I would say it was mainly the turtles and the tortoises, um, that that kind of kept me going as far as my interests went. And then when I got older into high school, I ended up keeping snakes, and one of the first species was gray banded king snakes, Lampropeltis alterna, and that led into a whole different scene for me.
Yeah, that's cool. What got you interested in gray bands?
I saw a talk at a park, Jesse Jones Park, which is one of my local. It's currently a local park to me because I moved back to my hometown about 7 years ago. But a guy named Russ Jaley did a presentation about king snakes, and one of the king snakes he had on display was a freshly hatched gray banded king snake, and I'd never seen a prettier snake in my life. It was a like a Blair's phase alterna, and from that point on, it had an imprint as far as you know. I just it was just an incredible looking animal in my opinion, and
Yeah.
still is.
Oh yeah.
And so that stuck with me. So years went by, and when I got into high school, and I ended up working for another uh, owner of the same pet store, his wife bred gray bands. So we're talking about 93, 94. Um, and I had an opportunity to get a gray band of my own. And so I took that animal on, raised it up, and ended up going to the East Texas Herpetological Society expos at that time, which were uh, usually 2 days of talks, and then the Sunday would be kind of a swap meet, and where you could buy offspring, captive bred offspring from people. So I ended up getting a female 277 Alterna from Don Soderberg, who is pretty well known as far as corn snakes go. And that was my first pair of alternative breed, and I bred them before I graduated high school. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Alterna are one of the, really one of the crown jewels of Texas, if not North America. And it's just such a cool species, and yeah, definitely one of my favorites. And so when did that pivot into you going out west?
So I graduated high school in 1997, and that summer, a good friend of mine that I knew from the pet shop days, named John Wisser, went the previous weekend or 2 weekends before that, went out to West Texas, was introduced to West Texas by none other than Wayne Howell, who I think you've interviewed before.
Yes, sir.
And he said, "You need to get out here." I mean, he knew that I was interested in these snakes. And we went out there, and the second night, we found an Alterna on a rock cut, a little male in Langtree, along Highway 90. And that kind of sparked my interest in field herping more so than, I mean, anything else before. I was always interested in looking for animals. And like I said, the Bayou City, we have drainage dishes, and there were turtles prevalent and water snakes. But that was what really sparked my interest in, like, hey, I need to go west. I need to find animals out west,
Yes, yeah.
uh, that were interesting and bright and colorful and neat. So I definitely found that first trip was a teaser, because I've never been a great Alterna collector hunter um, throughout the years, but I kind of got teased into it early with that trip during during that trip along Highway 90, which Damon Salceus calls the gray band red light district, I think is what he called it before. It's where they're commonly found, easy to find, um, and that kind of draw you in. And since then, I've tried to find them further west, and I'm just not that great at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, it gets harder when you start getting away from those central areas for sure. And especially kind of early on though, the numbers that we're seeing were so much higher than what we see today. And it's pretty interesting. And then yeah, to go out there and have your first, you said that was your first trip or your second trip
That
going
was
out there?
my first trip was in '97, and I have the exact date down somewhere. But yeah, with John Wisser and Brian Williams, and it was I don't remember trips after that because I probably didn't find Alterna like within that that time span. But uh, I that perked my interest and got me going out west.
Yes, it would. It would.
And
It's yeah, especially just that getting that tease like you said, where you find one the first trip, it makes it seem easy, and
right.
and then every subsequential trip where you're sat there going, I don't know about you, but for me, the internal self hate grows as the time passes, and you get to the point where you're
That's
like,
a great way to describe it. And I found it cathartic to go out to West Texas from my I was an only kid, and I certainly didn't come from a bad home or anything, but there were just years after that I needed to get away, and going to West Texas was so cathartic for me. I loved it. I loved getting out there, and I would drive the roads, and I would try to. In those days, we spotlighted, and I was really just not cut out for spotlighting, especially along like Highway 277. I mean, it just traffic got worse. But I would go out and I'd walk cuts, and I would try my hardest, but I just wasn't a very good alterna collector or finder. Found a lot of other neat animals, bugs, and then I went further and went out to the Davises, and I met Buzz Ross, and I used to just crash at Buzz Ross's place, and
okay,
we would talk about going out herping, and every now and then I would do it, and we I ended up just kind of meeting people going through and finding myself kind of through herping, and it was interesting. It was very a good time. Like I have no like qualms about that, but it was interesting to kind of see different biomes and just get out and see and herp.
yeah, I think that to expand on the idea of the cathartic nature of being in West Texas, where I agree. Where when you're out there, I think that there's sometimes a lot of, I'm always thinking, right, about the next thing or what's going on or what has to happen. And I think a lot of people are like that.
What'll
And
make the next trip, or what'll make your trip currently?
well, that too, but I mean just in my everyday life when I'm walking around, right, and I'm working my job and I'm doing that, right? It's just the everyday human thoughts, the thoughts of an adult in life. And then or even a young man, right, growing up, that then when you find yourself in West Texas and you're so intently focused on not falling off a rock cut or getting bit or ran over, and you're just like, find the snake. It's this unique snippet in time where personally my mind is completely clear and it's just focused on that thing like a dog on a ball. And I think that's what I find the most relaxing and peaceful about it. And I don't know if maybe that's what. if you would
That's what
relate
I
to that feeling.
yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head with that. That's how it was for me. But it was also about the people that I was around, and just kind of feeling like you were in a community of like minded folks, kindred spirits, and that's always been a what kind of kept me going through not being not just a hobbyist, but this I was always that kid that was interested in finding something else, finding life forms that I was never that interested or worried about space travel. There was life forms to find on Earth that were just as interesting, and
Yeah,
that's that was always kind of how what forced me onward.
yeah. No, right. I mean, and I think too, right, that being a young man, kind of growing up and getting, thrusted into life, and here we go, right? We're becoming an adult, and here talking to you guys and many of the guests were, hey, some of my first like, oh, here's my people, here's this, here's that, is going to, a reptile club, meeting in their area and how influential that is in their life, right? And so to define those people and connect with that, and to see other people, and you, right, guys that are older than you that are living their life, and you're going, okay, there's a route in this, there's other, there's adults that are into this. It gives legitimacy to the way you're feeling about stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And some of those adults were definitely ones you wanted to, emulate and work towards, a life with kids or, a typical life, I guess. But yeah, it was, I think Texas uniquely, I have not herped Kansas, and I know that's a herp state, but I think Texas is a great state as far as diversity and getting out, and maybe the culture around it is something that is unique.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I think it's a very cool aspect to it, and how intertwined it all is. That's something that getting to do this and talk to all these people, the interconnection that is there is is always surprising to me, and very, it's very nice. It's very nice to actually realize how big this community is.
it
Well,
is
that
good.
so early on, kind of running into Buzz Ross, what was that like? And you're saying you're crashing at his house. How, do you remember anything stand out to you other than just getting to do that? Any great stories?
Uh, I ended up from 2004 to 2009. I was a reptile keeper at the Houston Zoo, and I met up with a lot of people that were old school zoo people, um, and Buzz Ross was always kind of mentioned. I can't remember if Buzz was at Fort Worth or Dallas or both, but I'd heard about him, and I had went to Mexico with Alan Carden, who was at that time um, curator of herpetology at the San Antonio Zoo. He later became general curator there. But Alan kind of took me under his wing, and years later, I ended up also meeting up with people like Buzz Ross and and Dave Blody. Excuse me, I'm kind of thinking and talking at the same time
All good.
here,
All good.
but yeah, no, I basically I met Alan Carden early on, and he kind of introduced me to a lot of the old school zoo guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's so cool to have that connection and get to again to be led into that group, and again, something I can relate with being the young guy in the group, and just how cool that is, and just so much knowledge to be soaked in, and it's badass, when you're sat there and you're like, damn, I'm at the table with these guys. There's so much information to be gained from those guys, and especially someone like Alan Carter, where his name comes up a lot, in just everyday kind of, oh, I have this bloodline of this animal, came from the San Antonio Zoo, and his particular interest in Mexico, I think really helped shape the Texas herpetoculture scene.
Alan was a great guy, is a great guy. I speak to him and I speak about him. I've been in touch with him since he's left the zoo world, and he was a great inspiration to me. Like, just he was kind of an idol, if I could say that.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated him taking me under his wing. It on one trip, and meeting up with so many people in Mexico, and meeting up with David Lascano, particularly, who has passed away. But it meant a lot to me. I mean, it legitimized my whole love, and everything that I was interested in made sense then. And yeah, I really, really appreciate what I got from that. So although I'm not in the zoo world anymore, I really learned a lot from these people, and I think if I could impart something to future generations, don't be too quick to disregard what some of these old school guys have to say, because you can learn a lot, and there's a reason. I mean, a reason why we are where we are. Um, we we didn't come out of nowhere. There was a foundation built by people that took an interest in these animals and took them into captivity, and continued to work with them, and made our hobby.
Yeah, for sure. You got to think, right? Think of some of these guys early on, right? That were building their own cages, stripping down refrigerators to get heating cord out of that to use to heat their animals. We didn't have access to what we have now. It's super cool that we do, but the early ways of keeping and the easiness of either ordering a rack or going and picking up whatever type of cage that we have access to now, those weren't options. The different heating elements, proper lighting, vitamins, veterinary care, it wasn't around, and a lot of those guys took the time to figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was. Uh, we've come a long way, to put it lightly. Yeah. So, but I've kind of lost track as far as where I was talking about what I did. But I worked at the Houston Zoo from 2004 to 2009, and I assisted with uh, a mark recapture study with Crotalus polystictus, the lance-headed rattlesnake in Mexico State, and that was a great experience. I I saw a lot of. There wasn't quite the diversity of animals, but I also did a survey in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and found some really neat animals. Um, Lamprepeltis, Leonis, and Crotalus. I guess it's Marulus now, but various species that were of great interest.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. And so that was your focus going down there, were those two studies.
Um, the Polystictus was a study. It was a mark recapture study. Um, the trips to Tamaulipas were with my colleague William Farr, and he was doing surveys of Tamaulipas, basically just finding whatever we could herpetologically. And so I just kind of tagged along with him as a zoo employee. And that's when we were able to turn up some pretty interesting animals. And some of those photographs have been published, and he's had his work published. Like I said, William Farr. Um, as far as range extensions and this sort of thing.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, Mexico is like I don't know. I relate with what you were saying earlier about kind of the way I look at it is I'm very focused on Texas, and I'm afraid to go anywhere else and have as strong of an addiction to being out there where it's even harder for me to get to. And so, but Mexico looks so interesting. I hope to one day get to take a trip down there and experience it, because it it just seems like the holy land, for
I
the
mean,
stuff I'm
herp
into.
diversity. Yeah, herp diversity is crazy. But it's my understanding that it's still, Tamaulipas is still not that safe. And I'm talking about like 2004 to 2009, and there wasn't quite as much trouble there. And from my understanding, it's still not that safe in Tamaulipas. And I don't know what safe means, but it was like when I would talk to some of these old herpers, they'd say, well, you don't want to be driving down a road at dark. And, well, that's kind of how you herp, driving down a road at dark. So it was, to me, it was always an interesting place to go, but I always preferred to have uh, people that knew the terrain and were able to navigate. So yeah, as much as I think Mexico's a gold mine of herping, I wouldn't suggest that anybody just go down, without considering that.
Yeah, yeah, that's part of the reasons why I haven't been, but hopefully one day. Hopefully one day. Well, excellent. So kind of so you did the zoo field, and then you're now more into your private keeping, and what are you keeping now?
So I keep primarily mountain king pyros, Arizona mountain kings, and I have a few alterna, which I bred pretty extensively in the late 90s, early 2000s. I wish I would have kept some of those bloodlines going, but I've kind of gotten in and out of animals. So I've got some Western locality alterna. I've got bear dye. I love bear dye. Beards, rat snakes. I've also got uh, pitch you off is deni. I've got some. I'm sorry, I'm cutting out.
You're good.
I've got some rosy boas. I've got rosy mid Baja rosy boas. I've got green rat snakes, and that's about it
Very
currently.
cool. Very cool. No, I like that. That's a very cool collection. I can relate with a couple of those things for sure. Well, that's so cool. And so kind of right getting to see the hobby expand and kind of I think my prime and getting into the hobby and kind of learning was probably about 10 years after you were kind of going through the pet shop world and doing all that. So I can I imagine seeing the differences that you saw, seeing that and seeing where we are now. What do you think the future of the hobby is, and where do you see it going?
I'd like to see, well, what I would like to see, and I'm really intrigued by the ball pythons and the corn snakes. All the different morphs are really interesting to me. I find it a little bit intimidating because that's not my my knowledge set, I guess. Um, but I think if that gets people into the hobby, I think it's great. Um, but I see people piling on to one particular species and potentially um, there being a
Like
overload,
yeah,
a
a glut
glut.
of that
Yeah,
particular species. Yeah,
right.
I think that's definitely a risk. And
I'll give you an example. I breed Chihuahua geckos, and I had no problem selling Chihuahua geckos at maybe wholesale prices even a year ago. Now I'm sitting on these Chihuahua geckos, which I didn't breed any this year. These are from last year, and I intentionally didn't breed these animals because I can't find homes for them
yeah,
at the price that I'm willing to sell them for because they're, I mean, they're animals I invested in their parents and I feed their parents and, I have to recoup something. Um, so I cut off breeding the Chihuahua geckos. But I I think I would tell people keep what you love because if you don't, even if you can't make a penny off of it, if it's an animal, I mean, I love gray banded king snakes. I love Arizona mountain king snakes, and just looking on them, taking care of them, making sure they have water and food is entertainment enough for me. I don't need any more than that. But I would tell people to work with animals that they really enjoy, um, because that's what it's all about. I mean, we're keeping animals in captivity, and it's not ideal. Captivity is, as a former zookeeper, I can tell you, this might be an unpopular opinion, but captivity is not ideal for anybody. And if you keep an animal in captivity, you need to make sure you're trying to cover every aspect of their life and making sure that they're doing well. And that's easiest done if you keep a smaller number of animals that you really like and animals that bring interest to you.
Yeah, for sure.
So
It's very true.
that would be my my adage.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with that. Well, as we start to wind down here, is there anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't, and that I missed?
I'd like to again. Just I appreciate you the interview, and no, I don't think that you missed anything. I think you done a thorough job. But
Excellent.
but yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and it's all you. I just I get the chance to speak to awesome people like you, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me, and I'm sure we'll do it again in the future. Well, again, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me, and I look forward to our future conversations.
Thank you.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.